Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your organisation's relationship to social, youth and community work?
Yep. Okay, my name's Pete Widlinski and I'm the Information and Communications Manager for the North of England Refugee Service. NERS is a registered charity, it's been going since 1989, based in the North East, and we provide advice and support to people who are seeking asylum and settled refugees. A lot of that work includes integration work, particularly youth integration, bringing the host community along with young refugees and asylum seekers. It's about awareness raising. We do a bit of campaigning and lobbying in the North East to support our clients. Social work, before 2000, social services used to provide support for asylum seekers waiting for a decision on their case. But since 2000, the system of support for asylum seekers is outside the regular system. It's a specific system funded by the Home Office. So social services don't get so involved until somebody's outside the system, they've lost their support. And if they have a specific care needs under Section 21 of the relevant Act, then we can ask social services to provide support. Often they don't, and we have had to take judicial reviews against various social services or at least threatening. That's usually enough to get support instated for somebody.
Okay.
And we also do a lot of work with the universities providing student placements, social work student placements.
Could you tell us a little bit about your organisation's strengths in your experience and some of the successes you've had to put some stories to the general principles?
Yeah. Strengths, I suppose we're a regional organisation. Refugee Council, for instance, one of our partners, is a national body. They don't have as much in-depth support, if you like, across the country because they're national. They don't have a base in every region, and if they do, it tends to be very limited support. Whereas we are firmly rooted in the North East. We're not just a project, we're actually an organisation that has some standing, really, and we sit at the top table in various decision-making bodies. We work very closely with the regional police and social services and councils and government office North East and UK border agency we have quite close relationships with, although they're not always very positive, but we do work closely with them because that partnership is really important for the benefit of our clients. So I think our strength is that we're a regional organisation. We have contacts and partnerships across the whole of the region, and if we need any support, for instance, when the cuts came in, we had a campaign against the cuts, as did other refugee support agencies in the UK. And according to the Refugee Council, they had more responses from people in the North East complaining about the cuts than anywhere else in the UK. And that's because, I think, of our roots firmly embedded in the North East, and we've got a lot of support from people locally.
Could you tell us a little bit, for those people watching this short film who aren't from the North East, a little bit about the North East and its culture, if you could sum up such a complicated question?
Well, I'm a foreigner. I'm from the West Country, so I've lived here for 25 years. Culture, I think, is very welcoming, to be honest. I think people in the North East are pretty welcoming. It's always been a working class area, quite heavy industry, I guess, although obviously that's changing. But I think that gives people a bit more of a sense of community, particularly in the sort of steel, chemical industry, shipbuilding. That was the big industries that we had that aren't so prevalent nowadays. But people still remember that, and people were still involved in those industries a few years ago. So I guess that sense of community. The North East hasn't fared particularly well when there's been other austerity measures throughout the last, since the 70s, 80s, 90s, I guess, where lots of industries were lost. And I think that develops a sense of community. And one thing we had a stowaway who died on board a ship. We had no idea who he was, found in Teesside, in Teesport. And we helped arrange the funeral, we advertised it. And 40 local people who we'd never met before around South Bank and Eston came along to the funeral to pay the last respects. You know, they had no idea who it was, but being a port, I guess, people understand what it's like going to sea and how dangerous that can be. So really, I think, one thing I always say is that the vast majority of people support asylum seekers, just most of them don't know it yet. Yeah. Once they meet somebody and they realise they could be your mum and dad, brother, sister, your kids, you know, you realise basically everybody's a human being and the same, and I think people respond to that. But it's that human contact that they have to have, and that's something that NERS helps to provide.
Moving on to contemporary issues, Pete. One of the big agendas of the current government is cuts during what's advertised as an age of austerity. Could you tell us a little bit about how the cuts of the last few years have affected your services and how future cuts might continue to affect you?
Yeah, well, the biggest effect really was on our one-stop service, which is funded by the Home Office. Every region has a one-stop service to support people who've been dispersed to the area who are waiting for a decision on the case. And the government announced with 2 months' notice a 62% cut in funding to the one-stop service, which is our biggest project really. Of course that had quite a devastating effect. Unfortunately, it happened at the same time that we lost a number of other projects, you know, that were funded for 2-3 years, and it all sort of coincided together. So we've actually lost about 2/3 of our staff in the North East, which is quite a blow really. And all the staff, recognising the difficulties we're in, we've all taken a 10% cut in our salary. Didn't particularly want to, but we recognise that probably it's better not to lose any more jobs really, and so we're all sort of sharing that cost. So we're trying to keep things going, but obviously we don't have as much staff. We don't actually have any funding now to help people once they get refugee status, which I think is a big blow, and it's probably the first time since NERS has been going since 1989 and probably before then that there's been no funding from central government to help with refugee integration. So we've been hit quite badly, I think. We have a very supportive and well-experienced board of directors who've been taking quite a leading role in restructuring the organisation. So we're hoping we're going to get through this. But of course, this is just the very beginning of the austerity measures. They could go on for another 2 or 3 years, and what's going to happen in the future, we don't really know.
If you could use this short interview to give one message about your work, then what would it be? And about the people you serve?
Yeah, well, the message really to funders is especially in times of austerity, particularly the government, is an easy option to cut funding from the voiceless, you know, the most vulnerable people in society, which is, I think, who we work with. But they are really the people that need support most. It's important that people recognise the difference between an immigrant or a migrant and somebody who's seeking protection, somebody who's seeking asylum, who believe that they're refugees from their home country. You know, they're fleeing persecution, torture, death threats, threats to their lives and their families' lives. So it's important that we maintain our international obligations to support people and provide them with sanctuary, a safe place, and consider their cases appropriately. So really, my message really is not to take away funding from vulnerable people. We all have a duty to support people who have to flee from violence and persecution, and that's something that I think society in the UK needs to maintain.
Thank you.
Right.